Welcome to the deep dive. You know Os Lusíadas as Portugal's national epic, right? This huge monumental work that really captures the spirit of a whole age.
Absolutely. It's foundational.
But what if I told you that the very text we read today, the one on our shelves or screens, is actually the result of this incredible journey? Like miraculous survival, a fight against censorship, and some serious scholarly detective work that's only, well, relatively recently uncovered its true origins.
It's an amazing backstory.
That's the extraordinary story we're diving into today. We're not just looking at the grand themes, which are huge in themselves, but the really fascinating journey of its creation, its preservation, how it even got to us.
It truly is a universe in itself, and so much of that universe, well, it's been kind of shrouded in misconception for centuries.
Misconception about a
And-
work this famous.
Oh, absolutely. Os Lusíadas presents this whole cosmos of challenges and triumphs, sure, but the story behind the story that demands our attention too, not just for the literary genius, which is undeniable, but for the sheer ambition behind it and the intensely personal struggles that shaped its very existence and how it finally got published. So
Yeah.
we're going to try and peel back those layers of time, uncover some of these long-held textual secrets, and really appreciate the influences that shaped Camões' genius, and maybe even more fascinating, his critique of society, which feels surprisingly modern, actually.
Okay, so prepare for some truly revelatory insights, I think,
Yeah.
and a conversation that tries to balance the big picture with those, incredibly memorable little details that stick with you.
Exactly.
We're about to jump right into the core source material for this deep dive. It's a critical preface to a 2000 edition of Os Lusíadas, and it was meticulously researched and written by Professor Álvaro J. da Costa Pimpão.
Professor Costa Pimpão's work is it's absolutely crucial here. It's the key, really, because it gives us these insights that let us untangle centuries of assumptions. Assumptions about how the poem was composed, about its very first publications.
The first printings, yeah.
And the incredibly careful scholarship needed to present a work this monumental, this important, accurately to new generations. He basically serves as our guide through what's been, frankly, a labyrinth of literary history for a long, long time.
That's a powerful way to put it, a labyrinth. It shows us how even a text that we think of as totally foundational, totally understood, can still hold these profound secrets, just waiting for the right kind of investigation.
Right, waiting for someone to really dig in with fresh eyes and rigorous methods.
So this isn't just about literary analysis in an abstract sense. It's a story of incredible dedication, of the sheer survival of a manuscript against, well, pretty much all odds.
The shipwrecks, poverty,
Yeah.
travel.
And this scholarly detective work that has fundamentally reshaped how we understand this classic. Professor Costa Pimpão's rigorous approach means we get to see Os Lusíadas not just as some static historical artifact sitting on a shelf,
Right, not just a museum piece.
but as something that came into being through immense struggle, through meticulous effort. It really changes how you perceive both the author, Camões, and the book itself. His work lets us look at this masterpiece with fresh eyes, armed with a much deeper understanding of his true origins.
It's a testament, really, to how even these really well-established literary works can hold secrets. It's waiting for the right kind of detailed investigation to bring them out. Pimpão's analysis is absolutely foundational to understanding the true origins of the text we actually read today. It gives us a critical lens on stuff that was just, taken for granted for way too long.
Okay, so that's the story of the text's survival, which is already incredible. But what about the author's own journey, the life that shaped this epic? When we picture epic poets, working, we usually imagine these quiet studies, right?
Yeah, maybe some dusty scrolls, quiet contemplation.
Peaceful contemplation, exactly. Surrounded by books, maybe the scent of old parchment, that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
But Luís de Camões' reality, as Professor Pimpão's preface really highlights, it was anything but that.
Not even close.
What's truly remarkable, and Pimpão points this out, is the sheer contrast. The gap between the work's magnitude, this sprawling, complex, incredibly detailed epic, and the author's life, which was itinerant, often incredibly difficult. He was a soldier, a traveler, constantly moving.
That's such a crucial point, and our source, Pimpound's preface, really emphasizes this stark reality. You see it particularly in the debate about the poem's chronology, like when was it actually written?
Right, the timeline.
For a long time, there was this theory, pushed pretty hard by Manuel de Foria Sousa, who was a major commentator back in the day. He suggested that a lot of the poem, maybe the bulk of it, was written before Camões even left for India in 1553.
For the big voyage. Interesting.
Yeah, and Sousa even cited this compelling detail, this story about a manuscript of 6 cantos, 6 whole sections that were supposedly stolen from Camões before he sailed.
Stolen. Wow. That definitely paints a dramatic picture, like the poet already deep into his masterpiece before the adventures even begin. Very romantic.
It is romantic, yeah. A true literary mystery right from the start, stolen cantos, definitely adds a layer of intrigue. But Professor Costa Pimpound, after his really exhaustive research looking at everything, he offers this compelling counter-argument, and it really shifts our understanding.
Okay, so what does Pimpon say?
He argues that the work, Os Lusíadas as we know it, in its complete form actually began to take shape later, probably in 1554 or maybe shortly after that, while he was already in the East.
So during his time in India and beyond, not before.
Exactly. And he points to this very specific, kind of undeniable detail as evidence. It's the dedication, the part written to King Sebastian.
Ah, the young king.
Right. Pimpound concludes this dedication must have been written at the end of 1554, after the news of the king's birth finally reached Camões way out in India.
That makes sense, logistically.
And the poem itself directly references the monarch as a tender and new blossoming branch. It's a very specific image for a newborn king. And that detail, Pimpound argues, firmly places that part of the composition post-1554.
Huh. So that's not just tweaking the dates a little bit. That's a fundamental rethink of the poem's whole genesis.
It really is. It suggests the grand vision, the bulk of the poem's structure. It all solidified while Camões was actively serving as a soldier, traveling, experiencing the things he'd later write about, not just sitting and imagining it beforehand.
Imagine the logistical challenges. I mean, composing something this long, this intricate, filled with incredibly detailed historical references, all the mythology, the complex poetic form.
Yeah, the ottava rima rhyme scheme throughout.
Right. Doing all that while serving as a soldier, maybe in difficult conditions, traveling on ships, navigating treacherous journeys across continents and oceans. It's mind-boggling.
This on-the-go composition, it's not just some interesting biographical footnote. It speaks to an extraordinary level of discipline, of dedication. You really have to wonder how he managed it.
How did he keep it all straight? Where did he even find the time, the materials?
We can only speculate, really. But you have to think about how this constant movement, this exposure to the world's raw elements, the sea, different cultures, conflict, how that might have infused the poem itself. Maybe it gave it that visceral sense of adventure, of struggle, a kind of grittiness that a poem written entirely in a library might lack.
That's a great point. It certainly complicates that traditional image of the lone, isolated poet in his study, doesn't it?
Completely. It makes the achievement seem even more impressive somehow.
It truly does. I mean, like you said, it's hard enough to write a grocery list on a moving train, let alone craft 10 cantos of epic poetry during perilous sea voyages or military campaigns. In this context, this understanding of his life, it leads us straight to another truly astonishing part of the poem saga.
Yeah.
Its physical survival, its miraculous preservation.
Ah, yes, the shipwreck.
The famous shipwreck off the coast of China, probably late 1558 or early 1559, where Camões supposedly swam ashore, holding his manuscript above the waves, saving his wet cantos.
The classic image.
It feels like the stuff of legend, almost too dramatic to be true. But is it just a colorful anecdote? What does Professor Pimpound tell us about its actual significance? Is it just a good story?
Well, it's a great story, but no, it's not just an anecdote. It's profoundly significant for understanding the scale of the poem at that specific time. The very fact that he could save a substantial portion of the manuscript from a shipwreck, that tells us something crucial.
What does it tell us?
It signifies that the poem was already a substantial volume. Our source, Pimpound's preface, really emphasizes this. Its loss at that point would have been, quote, irreparable.
Irreparable, so it wasn't just a few notes or drafts.
Exactly. It clearly indicates that the bulk of the work was done by the time of that shipwreck. This wasn't a few hastily scribbled lines on napkins. This was a massive undertaking, already well underway. A testament to the immense effort Camões had already poured into it for years.
Wow. Okay, so the legend points to a reality. The poem was largely complete by then.
Largely complete, yes. But importantly, this wasn't the end of its journey toward completion. We actually have concrete historical validation for its later stages.
Oh yeah, from who?
From the historian Diogo de Couto, he was contemporary also in the East. And Couto directly witnessed and actually recorded Camões continuing to polish the poem, refining it, while they were both in Mozambique. This was much later, between 1568 and 1569.
So almost a decade after the shipwreck, he's still working on it.
Yeah.
Polishing.
Yes. So it wasn't just about survival. It was persistent refinement, constant improvement, even under difficult circumstances.
So he's not just saving it from the water, he's actively perfecting it for years afterward, even when he's stranded or in transit or probably struggling financially. It just makes you wonder about the sheer determination, the single-mindedness required to preserve and continue working on such a huge manuscript when your life is often precarious.
Yeah, your environment's constantly changing. Your resources are likely pretty limited.
What does that tell us about his dedication to his art? It suggests this almost obsessive commitment, doesn't it? A belief in the profound importance of his work that just transcended personal hardship.
It really does. He must have viewed this poem as his life's purpose. Something bigger than himself that he simply could not abandon no matter what. What kind of internal drive does that represent? It's hard to fathom.
It speaks to an almost, prophetic conviction in the value of his creation. To carry such a bulky manuscript through shipwrecks, various exiles, periods of poverty, constantly refining it.
Yeah.
It implies he knew its monumental significance even before it saw the light of day.
Yeah, like he could see its future impact. Or maybe the act of creation itself was his anchor, the one constant thing in an otherwise turbulent life.
That makes sense. It's a powerful reminder that some of the greatest works of art aren't created in ivory towers. They're forged in the crucible of real-world struggle. And maybe that makes them resonate even more powerfully.
I think so. That lived experience comes through.
Okay, so from the work's physical survival, its painstaking composition over years and across continents, it then made its way finally into the public sphere, back to Portugal.
The final hurdle, publication.
Right. And the official publication timeline for Os Lusíadas, according to the records, seems quite precise. It was apparently in print by September 23, 1571. That's based on the date of the royal license to print.
God, the king's okay.
And then it was officially released, available for sale, on March 12, 1572.
And Camões himself, he received a reward for this momentous achievement.
A pension, right. Yeah, an annual pension of 15,000 reis, which wasn't a fortune, but it wasn't nothing, for 3 years. And the record specifically mentions it was for his talent and skill and his competence in the book.
Competence in the book. Interesting phrasing.
It is. So it seems straightforward, doesn't it? A clean, official release for a national epic. Finally done. But here's where that publication puzzle truly begins and where Professor Pimpau's detective work becomes absolutely indispensable. Because it wasn't quite that simple.
Not simple at all. This is precisely where that scholarly rigor becomes absolutely crucial. Our source, Pimpão, reveals that the 1572 publication isn't actually a single clear event. It's a puzzle, a real head-scratcher that has intrigued scholars for centuries.
How so?
Well, it turns out there exist two distinct editions, both dated 1572. Academics know them as Edition A and Edition B.
Two different versions from the same year. That seems odd for first printing.
It is odd, and for a long time it caused a lot of confusion. Now, the most visible distinguishing feature between A and B is actually quite charming in its simplicity. It's an engraving on the title page.
Okay. An image.
Yeah, a picture of a pelican. The bird, often shown feeding its young with its own blood, a symbol of sacrifice.
Right, I know the symbol.
Well, in Edition A, the pelican's neck faces left, from the reader's perspective.
Okay, A equals left-facing pelican.
And in Edition B, the pelican's neck faces right.
B equals right-facing pelican. Huh. Seems like such a tiny, almost trivial difference. Did it really matter which way the bird was looking?
Oh, it mattered hugely. That seemingly tiny detail, a pelican's head facing left instead of right, became the key. The key to unlocking centuries of textual confusion and error. It's like finding, a single misplaced brick that reveals a secret chamber in an ancient building.
Wow. Proving how meticulous scholarly detective work can overturn these long-held assumptions.
Exactly. And here's Professor Costa Pimpau's pivotal conclusion after his, quote, thorough collation of the readings in both editions, meaning he compared them word by word, comma by comma.
Painstaking work.
Incredibly painstaking. And his conclusion was definitive. Edition A, the one with the left-facing pelican, is the true princeps. The first, the original, the most authoritative edition from 1572.
Okay, so what was B then? The one with the right-facing pelican?
Yeah.
If it wasn't the first.
Pimpen determined that edition B is an imperfect counterfeit, basically a copy, and likely one that was issued much later.
Later, but it still says 1572 on it.
Yes, that's the confusing part. Pimpen speculates it was possibly issued maybe in 1584 or 1585, maybe even later, possibly after what our source intriguingly describes as a disastrous edition of the Pisco.
No Piscos, what does that mean?
It's a bit obscure, but Piscos likely refers to finches, maybe suggesting small, cheap, or poorly made things. So Pimpen is referencing a particularly error-ridden and badly printed version that came out sometime after the original, which further muddied the waters for scholars and readers trying to figure out the true text. Edition B might have been an attempt to capitalize on the poem's fame, but done imperfectly.
Got it. So B was a later flawed copy, maybe trying to pass itself off as the original by keeping the 1572 date.
That seems to be the most likely scenario based on Pimpen's textual evidence. And the really crucial thing is, for a very long time, the scholarly consensus was wrong. Many believed that edition B, the counterfeit, was the actual princeps.
Really? Even serious scholars?
Yes, and this led to what Pimpen calls disastrous consequences for the text. It meant editors made wrong editorial choices based on the flawed edition B. Even highly esteemed scholars of the past, like Morgado de Mateus, and quite remarkably, even the famous literary historian Teofilo Braga, they used B as their base text.
Braga. Wow, he's a huge name.
Huge. And apparently, despite warnings from some contemporaries about the authenticity of edition A, Braga still reproduced B in his own influential editions, which meant he was essentially perpetuating the errors for generations of readers and students.
That's incredible. Why was this mistake so persistent? Why did it take so long to correct, even when people like Braga were warned?
Well, it really speaks to the immense challenges of textual authenticity, especially back then, before modern scholarly tools and standardized bibliographic practices. Subtle differences could easily be overlooked or misattributed, and, the authority of previous prominent scholars could inadvertently carry an error forward. Once a figure like Braga endorsed B, it became harder for others to question it.
Inertia, almost.
Kind of, yeah. Scholarly inertia. It really underscores the vital role of meticulous, modern critical editions like Pimpen's. They don't just present the text, they actively correct historical inaccuracies and try to ensure we're reading something as close as possible to the author's true intent. It's a powerful illustration of how the physical transmission of a text, the printing, the copying, the editing, can profoundly affect its reception and interpretation over centuries.
It's truly an incredible story. One subtle printing error, or maybe a deliberate counterfeit, ripples through generations of scholarship. It really highlights the painstaking work required to get back to the true original.
Absolutely. It's literary detective work at its finest.
And this brings us directly to Costa Pimpen's own goal for his 2000 edition, the one based on the true princeps, edition A. His stated goal was to, quote, make Os Lusíadas immediately available to the general public, but crucially, without losing the most characteristic features of Camões' poetic idiolect.
That's the tightrope walk, accessibility versus authenticity.
Exactly. It sounds like a really delicate balancing act. What did this intelligent modernization, as he called it, truly entail in practice? How do you make a 16th century poem accessible without, ruining its original flavor?
It absolutely is a delicate balance, and Pimpen was very conscious of this. His approach involved altering spelling and punctuation primarily. The goal was to increase accessibility, make it readable for a modern audience who isn't necessarily trained in 16th century Portuguese orthography.
Makes sense. Spelling changes alone can make a big difference.
Huge difference. But, and this is the key, it had to be done with profound respect for Camões' unique linguistic style, his voice. Pimpen wasn't trying to rewrite Camões in modern slang. Think of it less like a translation and more like creating a carefully constructed bridge between the 16th century and today.
So what are some examples? How did he decide what to change and what to keep?
Well, he made very specific reasoned choices. For instance, our source mentions he kept certain archaic forms like despois, which means after or then. Why? Because even though that's archaic, it was consistently used by Camões and felt like part of his characteristic voice, keeping it maintained a sense of the original era's texture.
Okay, so keep things that feel essential to the Camões sound.
Exactly. But then he rejected other archaic forms like artificio, even though a modern reader could probably figure it out. Why reject that one? Because it didn't meet his strict fidelity criteria for preserving the authentic poetic idiolect. It wasn't deemed as essential to Camões' unique signature, his specific way of using language and crafting his lines.
So it's a very nuanced judgment call in each case.
Extremely nuanced. It's about preserving the feel and the essence of Camus' voice, his rhythm, his specific vocabulary choices, not just the raw dictionary meaning of the words. It requires deep familiarity with the poet's entire body of work.
And what about punctuation? That's often a big challenge with older texts.
Oh, punctuation is a huge one. Our source points out that the punctuation in the original 1572 edition A certainly did not belong, at least exclusively, to Camões.
Meaning it wasn't necessarily the poet's choice.
Right. It was often the printer's decision, or maybe a scribe's if working from a manuscript. Printers back then had their own house styles, their own conventions, which often had more to do with fitting text onto a page than reflecting the author's intended rhythm or emphasis.
So the original punctuation might actually obscure the meaning sometimes.
It absolutely could. So Professor Costa Pimpau aimed for rigor and clarity in his own punctuation. The goal was to highlight the semantic values at play. This means the punctuation in his edition isn't just about making it easier for us to read, it's an interpretive act. It's about helping the modern reader understand Camus' precise meaning, his intended pauses, his connections between phrases, even when the original marks might have been ambiguous or misleading.
It's like a conductor carefully remarking an old musical score to reveal the composer's true intentions, bringing out the dynamics and phrasing.
That's a perfect analogy. It's exactly like that. It's an editorial performance, in a way, aiming for fidelity to the spirit of the original.
It sounds like, as our source aptly puts it, a Herculean task.
It really is.
Yeah.
This whole process, the detective work on the editions, the careful modernization, it showcases literature not as some fixed object, but as a living organism, something constantly in dialogue with its time, requiring interpretation and careful stewardship.
And it highlights the challenge of balancing accessibility for today's readers with scholarly integrity, staying true to the past. What do you think are the broader implications here for how we engage with historical texts in general?
Well, I think it tells us that a text isn't just a static artifact from the past. It's something that can be clarified, refined, and made more accessible through diligent, careful scholarship. It encourages us to appreciate the layers of interpretation, the history of printing and editing that accrue over centuries around any major work.
Right, it's not just the author's words, but how they reach us.
Exactly. And to value the work of scholars like Pimpam who strive to bridge that gap, to bring us closer to the original author's voice while acknowledging the passage of time, it truly makes the past accessible in a new, more informed way. It's not about dumbing down, it's about clearing away the accumulated dust.
That's a great way to think about it. Okay, we've navigated the incredible journey of Os Lusíadas as a physical object, as a text, a testament to human endurance, artistic dedication, and scholarly precision. Now let's dive into the magnificent content itself, the genius behind the words.
Yes, let's talk about the poetry.
What kind of mind could possibly weave such a rich, complex tapestry? A tapestry of recent history, ancient mythology, navigational science, and deeply personal critique. Because Os Lusíadas isn't just a well-preserved text, it's this incredibly rich blend, woven from classical learning, mythological figures, historical events.
It's encyclopedic almost.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's clear that Camões didn't invent the epic form he had, Homer and Virgil before him, but our source says he undeniably elevated it. How did he manage such a profound synthesis? How did he pull these different threads together?
He certainly did elevate it. His genius lies partly in how seamlessly he wove Portugal's very specific, relatively recent history, the Age of Discoveries, with the grand, timeless imagery and structures of classical antiquity. Pimpam's preface really showcases Camus' astonishing command of classical literature.
It wasn't just casual reading, you're saying.
Not at all. He deeply internalized poets like Virgil. Our source mentions passages imitated, sometimes quite literally. You can almost see the original Latin lines shimmering through his Portuguese verses.
So he's referencing Virgil very directly.
Very directly. But he wasn't just borrowing or plagiarizing. He was engaging in this profound intertextual dialogue. He was using the very forms and narrative strategies of ancient epics. Think about Virgil's Aeneid laying the mythical foundations for Rome. He was using those tools to forge a modern epic for Portugal, to give Portugal its own foundational myth, rooted in real historical achievement, but elevated by classical resonance.
That's fascinating, using the old forms to celebrate the new.
Precisely. And his classical education went far beyond Virgil and Homer, who were obviously central. He drew from Ovid, Horace, Hilarius Flaccus, Lucan, Claudian. The list goes on. Pimpam highlights this breadth of reading, and it's truly staggering for anyone, let alone someone living the kind of life Camus did.
A true scholar of his time, then, despite the chaos. And clearly a prodigy of memory and synthesis. It wasn't just poetry either, was it?
No, not at all. For the historical and philosophical underpinnings, he pulled from incredibly diverse sources. People like Plutarch, the Renaissance historian Sabellicus, Valerio Ride, Platina, Raffaele Maffei of Volterra. These aren't obscure names, but gathering and integrating their work was a major feat.
And the science. The navigation must have required specific knowledge.
Absolutely. He even incorporated cutting-edge cosmographic knowledge, particularly from Pedro Nunes' treatise on the sphere. Nunes was Portugal's leading mathematician and cosmographer at the time. That knowledge was vital for accurately and convincingly depicting Vasco da Gama's long and complex sea voyages. He needed the details to be right.
But what really strikes you, going back to his life story, is how he managed all this. Our source points out his prodigious memory. You have to consider the immense difficulty of keeping so many works, so many details readily available in his mind, especially after surviving that shipwreck where he's supposedly lost many of his possessions, possibly books.
Yeah, he probably wasn't carrying a huge library around with him.
Right. So how did he synthesize such a vast, diverse body of knowledge, poetry, history, philosophy, science, into one cohesive, epic poem while living this turbulent, often dangerous life?
It really speaks to an intellectual environment, maybe, or at least an individual capacity, where knowledge was deeply internalized, where connections across different disciplines were actively sought and made, even when physical access to text was limited or intermittent. He wasn't just compiling facts like an encyclopedia.
He was integrating them.
Yes, integrating them into a unified, singular vision. And let's not forget the absolutely crucial role of the Portuguese chronicles historians like Fernão Lopes de Castanheira and João de Barros. They provided, as Pimpon puts it, the thread of history, the narrative backbone of the recent Portuguese voyages and conquests, upon which Camões draped all these classical allusions, philosophical insights, and mythological frameworks.
So the chronicles gave him the what happened, and the classics gave him the how to make it epic.
That's a great way to put it. This synthesis demonstrates not just an individual genius, which was clearly immense, but it also reflects the intellectual ferment of his era, the Renaissance humanist spirit. Humanists were avidly engaging with both ancient wisdom and contemporary events, trying to make sense of their rapidly changing world. Camões' memory seems to have been a living library, constantly cross-referencing, weaving together these disparate threads into a coherent, powerful narrative. It's a testament to the power of a highly cultivated mind to create order and meaning out of immense informational input, even amidst chaos.
Okay, this brings us to Camões' sheer ambition for this poem, which Professor Pimpon argues was nothing short of audacious. He wasn't just telling a story of exploration. He was doing something truly groundbreaking, maybe even radical for his time.
Yes, absolutely. His core ambition, according to Pimpon's reading, was to deify the Portuguese people.
Deify, like make them gods.
Literally, yes. To present them as a new race of gods, elevated not by birthright like the Olympians, but through their own strength of spirit and the exercise of the highest virtues, courage, perseverance, faith, ingenuity. This isn't just about celebrating heroes like Vasco da Gama. It's about elevating an entire people, the Portuguese nation, to a semi-divine status through their collective actions. That's a truly profound, almost blasphemous claim for a Christian nation in the 16th century.
Wow, that is audacious. Elevating humans to godhood through virtue and deeds. So this is the core innovation Pimpon identifies.
This is the core innovation of Os Lusíadas, according to this interpretation. It moves beyond the traditional epic's focus on individual legendary heroes or ancient foundational myths. Instead, it argues for the divine stature of a modern nation achieved through its collective virtue and its incredibly bold actions on the world stage, the discoveries.
And how does he underscore this idea? How does he make that claim convincing within the poem?
Well, one brilliant move was his choice of the main divine antagonist, Bacchus.
Bacchus, the god of wine and revelry. Why him?
Excellent question. Because Bacchus, in ancient mythology, had famously conquered India himself, he had ancient ties to the East. So, in Camões' poem, Bacchus's animosity towards the Portuguese explorers isn't random. It stems from his jealousy and fear from knowing he will be dethroned by them.
Dethroned. So the Portuguese arrival in India is seen as displacing Bacchus's ancient claim.
Exactly. His hatred is rooted in the perceived threat the Portuguese posed to his ancient established glory as the conqueror of the East. It cleverly turns the human exploration and trade mission into a cosmic struggle for supremacy between old gods and new deified humans.
That really elevates the stakes, doesn't
Uh,
it? It makes the conflict cosmic, not just a human struggle against storms or hostile locals.
Precisely. Bacchus, this ancient god, hatches various plots against the Portuguese fleet throughout the poem, trying to thwart their journey. But all his divine schemes ultimately fail. And significantly, he eventually just kind of vanishes obscurely, as Pimpam puts it, even before the heroes achieve their final apotheosis, their ultimate reward and elevation.
He just fades away, beaten not by another god, but by human perseverance.
Essentially, yes. It implies the Portuguese, through their virtue and daring, are operating on a level that can overcome even the opposition of the old pagan gods. It elevates their struggle from a mere human effort against natural elements or earthly rivals to this profound, almost spiritual battle against an ancient, jealous, divine power. And the Portuguese, by virtue of their character, are destined to triumph.
So it's basically saying that the Portuguese achievements are so grand, so unprecedented, that they fundamentally challenge the old order of the world, including its ancient deities, that modern human virtue can actually surpass even ancient divine glory.
That's the core message, yes. Now, how does this deification resonate? Thinking about national identity and pride both then and now. In Camões' time, it must have been incredibly powerful. It served as a potent validation of Portugal's risky, expensive, and world-changing global ambitions and discoveries. It framed them not just as economic ventures, but as a divinely sanctioned destiny, a glorious mission ordained by heaven.
It gives a kind of spiritual justification for empire building, maybe.
You could certainly read it that way, and it undoubtedly fueled national pride. Today, though, the message might resonate differently. It still speaks, perhaps, to that universal human aspiration for greatness, for achieving something extraordinary, for leaving an indelible mark on history. The means are different. Maybe it's science, art, social progress, but the underlying idea of achieving a kind of immortality through exceptional virtue and effort, that's still potent.
Creating a new race of gods through human virtue. It's an incredibly powerful idea, very Renaissance in its humanism, but also, yeah, potentially problematic depending on how it's wielded.
Exactly. It's complex. It's both inspiring and potentially dangerous, like many powerful ideas.
And Camone's boldness, his audacity, doesn't stop with just deifying his countrymen, does it? He goes further.
He does. He very directly, very explicitly compares the Portuguese feats, especially the sea voyages, to those of the heroes of antiquity, Ulysses, Aeneas, the Argonauts. And he doesn't just compare. He states flat out that the Portuguese achievements surpass them.
He says they're better than the Odyssey or the Aeneid.
Not necessarily that the poem is better, but that the deeds it describes are greater. He argues that Os Lusíadas, the Portuguese people and their story, are destined to surpass the fame of the ancients because, quote, their deeds exceed them. He's not shy about it at all.
Wow.
He has Vasco da Gama declare that the Portuguese will, attempting greater things, show new worlds to the world. It's a direct contrast to the journeys of Ulysses, who wandered known seas, and Aeneas, who sought a prophesied land. The Portuguese, he claims, are doing something fundamentally new and more daring. That's a profoundly bold, intensely patriotic statement for his era. He's essentially claiming Portuguese exceptionalism, not just in the present, but over the very foundations of Western civilization and its defining stories.
Talk about confidence. Asserting national exceptionalism through unprecedented achievement. And this grand ambition, this confidence, is it reflected in how the poem is actually structured?
Oh, absolutely. The structure itself is designed to support this monumental claim, while the central axis, the main narrative thread, is undoubtedly Vasco da Gama's first voyage to India. Our source, Pimpam, makes it very clear that Os Lusíadas is not Gama's journey alone. It's much, much bigger than that.
So it's not just the voyage of da Gama.
No. The poem masterfully encompasses the entire sweep of Portuguese history. It brings in stories of all Portugal's past kings, its legendary heroes, its glorious barons, weaving them all together into what Pimpam calls a continuous celebration of Lusitanian identity throughout its 10 cantos. It constantly connects the present achievements of Gama and his men to the glories of the past.
So it's not a linear narrative just following the ships. It's more like a complex, interwoven tapestry, a kind of national saga compressed into one epic poem.
That's a perfect description, a tapestry. And this is achieved through various clever narrative devices embedded within the main story of the voyage. For example, up on Mount Olympus, we hear Jupiter delivering prophecies about future Portuguese triumphs yet to come.
Foreshadowing future glory.
Exactly. Then famously, when the fleet rounds the Cape of Good Hope, They encounter the giant, menacing figure of Adamastor, a titan transformed into the cape itself. And Adamastor delivers this chilling prophecy foretelling the future perils and shipwrecks that await Portuguese sailors in those waters. It adds this layer of tragic foreshadowing, acknowledging the costs of empire.
So it's not all just triumphant celebration, it acknowledges the dangers too.
It does, which adds depth. And then there's another brilliant device. While resting in Malindi on the coast of Africa, Vasco da Gama's brother, Paulo da Gama, unfurls the ship's banners, and he describes the figures painted on them to the local king.
The banners.
Yes, and this becomes a clever and perfectly integrated way for Camões to introduce capsule biographies of key historical Portuguese figures, kings, warriors, heroes from the past. It connects the present voyage directly to this long, heroic lineage stretching back centuries.
That is clever. It avoids just dumping historical exposition and weaves it right into the narrative flow.
Precisely. So this whole web of narratives and prophecies, as Pimpão calls it, it all serves this singular grand purpose, to glorify Portuguese achievements by embedding them within this vast historical and mythological context. It asserts their supremacy not just over nature or other peoples, but over previous civilizations, indeed, over the whole sweep of history as understood then.
How does this intricate structure reinforce the overall message of national grandeur?
By constantly reminding the reader and the characters within the poem that the present-day heroes, Gama and his men, are not just isolated adventurers. They are part of a long, illustrious lineage. They are fulfilling a destiny that stretches back through time, a destiny that transcends simple human endeavor and places them, and Portugal firmly in the pantheon of history's greatest nations. It's a truly sophisticated way of building a national epic, far more complex than just a travelogue or a simple chronicle of events. It creates this overwhelming sense of historical weight and significance behind the voyage.
Okay, from these grand themes, deification, historical sweep, national destiny, battles against gods and nature. Let's turn now to an episode within the poem that is perhaps the most celebrated, maybe the most beautiful, and certainly the most debated part of Os Lusíadas.
You must mean the Isle of Love.
Exactly. Canto 9. After all their hardships, all their battles and near disasters, Venus, who acts as the divine protector of the Portuguese throughout the poem, decides it's time to reward the sailors for their long labors.
What a reward she comes up with. Our source, Pimpão, describes how Venus decides to have prepared for them, there in the midst of the waters, some divine island. An earthly paradise, basically.
Appearing out of nowhere in the ocean.
Yeah, magically, yes. An idyllic haven adorned with, quote, 1,000 refreshments and dishes, with fragrant wines and roses, everything beautiful and restorative, and crucially, populated by beautiful, loving sea nymphs.
Loving nymphs. Okay, this sounds interesting. What's Venus's intention here? Just a nice break for the guys?
Well, yes, refreshment, but it's more than that. Her intention is laid out quite clearly in the poem. She says, I want there to be in Neptune's realm, where it was born, strong and beautiful progeny, offspring.
Wait, progeny. She wants the sailors and the nymphs to have children.
That's the explicit statement. Strong and beautiful children born from the union of these heroic mortals and these divine nymphs. And this is exactly where the interpretation becomes very interesting and where this reward has been the subject of centuries of scholarly contention and debate. What does it really mean?
Right. Because on the surface, it sounds pretty straightforwardly sensual, maybe even erotic.
It does, and this is exactly where the debate really deepens. It becomes a kind of litmus test for different interpretive approaches. How literally should we take this? Is it pure allegory? Is it something else?
And Professor Costa Pimpão, our guide for this deep dive, he weighs in on this debate quite forcefully, doesn't he?
Oh, he does. He steps in with this wonderfully blunt assertion that directly refutes many previous attempts to kind of spiritualize it, to subtly interpret the carnal delight into philosophical enjoyment, as he puts it. He basically says, stop trying to make it purely intellectual or allegorical.
And his famous line?
His wonderfully direct, almost witty line is simply, Venus is not Plato.
Huh. I love that. Venus is not Plato.
Meaning, stop trying to impose a purely philosophical, abstract meaning onto an episode that is, on its face, about sensual love and physical reward. His interpretation is quite clear. The island's primary purpose is to refresh a weary humanity of the sailors in a very tangible way. And crucially, that strong and beautiful progeny can only be achieved through generation, through physical union. For Pimpão, there's simply no room for allegory to completely erase or replace the literal physical meaning here.
It's a wonderfully direct, kind of grounded interpretation, isn't it? It cuts through centuries of potentially overly abstract, maybe even prudish readings
It really does. And Pimpone points out that the poem itself is incredibly explicit here. It describes lovers and ladies seated two by two. It describes the nymphs giving their white hands as wives to the sailors, promising them eternal company in life and death of honor and joy.
Eternal company.
Yeah.
As wife. It sounds pretty permanent.
It does. This sensual union, as Pimpone calls it, is presented not as something illicit or something that corrupts the epic's high-mindedness, but rather as something that humanizes the myth. It brings the divine reward down into the realm of lived human experience, of physical reality, of relationship. It's a very earthy, tangible reward for their superhuman efforts. It acknowledges their full humanity, their desires, their need for connection, not just their heroic deeds in battle or navigation.
Okay, so Pimpao argues strongly for the literal sensual reality of the Isle of Love. It makes you wonder then, why did these other interpretations arise? Why did so many later scholars or critics try to downplay the physical aspect and emphasize a purely allegorical or spiritual meaning?
That's a great question. Joseph Powell himself offers a couple of possible reasons. He suggests it might have been driven by a concern for originality among some later scholars, wanting to find deeper, less obvious meanings than the surface suggests. Everyone wants to offer a new interpretation.
Right, with the pressure to be original.
Or perhaps more significantly, it might have been a subtle nod to, or maybe an unconscious reflection of, the censorship and the stricter moral climate that was prevalent not just in Camoens' time, but for centuries afterward. A purely carnal interpretation of this central reward in a national epic might have seemed less palatable, maybe even scandalous to some. Easier to frame it as all allegory.
So maybe a bit of historical squeamishness about sex and high art.
Quite possibly.
Yeah.
What does this tension between the literal and the allegorical tell us? It reveals, I think, a historical reluctance, particularly in certain eras, to fully embrace explicit sensuality within works considered high art, or, especially, a national epic charged with representing national virtue. It reflects the shifting moral and religious frameworks over time.
And it shows how modern scholarship, like Pimpin's, isn't afraid to confront those older biases, perhaps, to get back to the likely intent of the text, even if that truth is a bit more, well, carnal than previously admitted.
Exactly. It's a fascinating insight into how cultural perceptions, societal norms, can really shape literary interpretation across the centuries. It shows that even a work celebrating national grandeur and virtue has to contend with, and perhaps even celebrate, the realities of human nature, including desire.
But Pimpao doesn't stop there, right? While he insists on the literal reality of the pleasure, he also acknowledges an allegorical layer. It's not just about sex and food.
Correct. He's not reductive. While the Isle provides literal pleasure and much-needed refreshment for the weary heroes, our source also makes it clear that Pimpon sees it as more than a pleasure refuge. He fully acknowledges its powerful allegorical dimension. He says it represents delightful honors that make life sublime.
Delightful honor. So it's not either literal pleasure or allegory, but somehow both simultaneously.
Exactly, both and. The nymphs and the angelic isle in this reading aren't just about physical gratification. They also symbolize the glory, the fame, the recognition, the honor that is justly deserved by those who perform heroic deeds.
How does that work? How can they be both nymphs and symbols of honor?
Well, the poem itself guides us here. Tethys, the sea goddess who welcomes Gama, explicitly links the delights of the island to the rewards of fame. She mentions the triumphs, the brow crowned with palm and laurel, the glory and wonder achieved by heroes. And these abstract concepts, she says, are also the delights of this isle. So the physical pleasures become intertwined with and symbolic of the intangible rewards of heroism. It's the ultimate reward package, you could say, both earthly and transcendent. It suggests that true honor, true glory manifests in multiple forms, satisfying both body and soul.
That's a remarkably sophisticated layering of meaning. It's not just simple allegory where X equals Y. It's more like the physical embodiment of the abstract reward.
Precisely. And this dual interpretation, the literal pleasure and the allegorical glory, adds immense complexity and depth to Camoens' overall vision of heroism and its rewards. It implies that true glory isn't some dry, abstract concept. It encompasses both the physical joys and satisfactions of human existence and the symbolic recognition of achievement.
It suggests a more holistic view of human experience, maybe, where the body and spirit aren't seen as separate or opposed, but rather as interconnected in the pursuit of greatness and its just rewards.
I think that's exactly right. It's a very sophisticated way of thinking about what it means to be truly honored, acknowledging both the visceral reality of pleasure and the abstract power of fame and glory. It avoids easy dualisms.
This nuanced view of reward, encompassing both the physical and the symbolic, leads us, perhaps surprisingly, to one of Camoens' rawest and most powerful messages. It comes right at the poem's very end, in the final canto, Canto X.
Yes, the famous closing stanzas.
After all the celebration, all the glory, all the divine rewards, he delivers this profound critique. It comes through the voice of his muse, Calliope, who he says is now out of tune and voice hoarse, not from singing praises, but from lamenting. Lamenting because she is, quote, singing to a deaf and hardened people.
It's a stunning shift in tone, isn't it? After 10 cantos building up Portuguese glory, he ends with this bitter critique.
It's not just a lament. It feels like Camoens' direct, unfiltered criticism of his own nation, his contemporaries, a kind of prophetic warning almost.
Exactly. He's turning the mirror back on Portugal itself. He criticizes his country, his patrons, his potential audience for not providing the favor that most fires the genius, basically for not supporting art and intellect properly.
And he says they are immersed in the taste for greed and in the rudeness of a stern, dull, and vile sadness. Wow. Strong words.
Extremely strong words. He's calling out the corruption, the materialism, the short-sightedness, and what he sees as a kind of spiritual decay setting in, even at the height of Portugal's global power. It's a stark contrast to the heroic virtues he spent most of the poem celebrating.
What specific things does he criticize?
He specifically highlights the base interest, meaning obsession with profit, and the hostile thirst for money that he saw corrupting the nobility and poisoning ambition within Portuguese society. He laments the erosion of the very values, honor, courage, public service that he believed were essential for true national greatness, the values embodied by the heroes of his poem.
So it's a lament that the Portugal of his day is failing to live up to the heroic ideals represented in Os Lusíadas itself.
Precisely. And this isn't just some abstract complaint or a general grumble about the times. It becomes an urgent, direct plea to the young King Sebastian himself, the dedicatee of the poem.
What does he ask the king to do?
He urges the king to actively favor and cheer his people, especially those who show merit, to relieve them from harsh laws, suggesting social justice concerns. And crucially, he advises the king to take counsel only from the experienced, from those who know the world through practice, not just theory.
And that famous line about military discipline.
Yes, he stresses that true competence, especially military leadership, is not learned, sire, in fantasy, dreaming, imagining, or studying, but by seeing, handling, and fighting.
Wow. That's a seasoned soldier's blunt assessment, isn't it? A direct call for practical wisdom, for valuing real-world experience over abstract knowledge, or perhaps courtly flattery and intrigue.
Absolutely. It's a moment where the epic poet seems to shed his lofty mantle and speaks as a man deeply concerned, maybe even disillusioned, about his nation's present state and its future trajectory. He's using the platform his epic gives him to deliver some hard truths.
And this is what makes Os Lusíadas ultimately so profoundly timeless, isn't it? This critical coda is why Professor Pimpão emphasizes its importance.
Exactly. These criticisms, Camões levels the dangers of corruption, the societal tendency to undervalue true merit, the prioritizing of profit over honor, the potential disconnect between theoretical knowledge and practical wisdom, the corrupting influence of greed. These are themes that just leap across the centuries. They transcend Camões' specific time and place and remain, as Pimpão puts it, painfully relevant today.
Painfully relevant, yeah.
Yeah.
You read those lines, and you can immediately think of parallels in our own world in almost any society.
Right. He's not just lamenting 16th century Portugal. He's diagnosing these fundamental societal ailments, these perennial human failings that continue to challenge nations and individuals centuries later. It transforms the poem. It's not just a historical celebration of past glory. It becomes, as Pimpão suggests, a mirror for the present.
A mirror constantly forcing us to question our own society's values. What do we consider true glory? What is the nature of power? How do we reward merit? How do we balance ambition with ethics?
Exactly. His words still resonate so powerfully because human nature and the complex challenges of governing societies justly and wisely remain remarkably consistent across time. That final critique ensures the poem never becomes just a relic. It stays alive, provocative, and deeply relevant.
This entire deep dive into Os Lusíadas, guided by Professor Pimpão's insights, has been a true revelation for me. I mean, from uncovering the secrets of the Princeps editions, that whole pelican story.
The left-facing pelican.
Right. And the remarkable tale of the manuscript's survival against all odds, to these profound reflections on human ambition, the nature of heroism, and the poem's incredibly layered meanings. We've really seen how one of the world's great epics was forged in hardship, refined through dedication, and then meticulously preserved not just by its author, but by generations of dedicated scholars trying to get it right.
And we've seen how Camões, despite being so deeply steeped in those classical influences, really did forge a singular, unique voice, a voice capable of both elevating his people to this divine, almost mythological plane,
Deifying them.
and then sometimes in the very next breath, turning around and sharply criticizing their profound flaws, their failings, their greed. It's this very complexity, this duality, this soaring celebration, and the biting critique that makes the work so rich, so endlessly fascinating. It invites us, compels us, really, to revisit it again and again, finding new insights, new resonances with each reading. It truly makes it a living text, not a closed book.
Yes, absolutely. And thinking back, that Isle of Love episode, it really stands out now as this vivid reminder that greatness, as Camões presents it, lies not only in heroic conquests or grand historical achievements,
Not just in the big public moments.
but also in the capacity to find beauty and delight and connection. Whether you read that as a literal carnal pleasure or as a symbolic spiritual reward for honor, or as Pimpone suggests, both at once, it truly reflects the multifaceted nature of human experience. It reminds us that even in the grandest, most serious epics, there's essential room for the deeply personal, the sensual, the human element that makes even divine triumphs feel relatable, grounded.
It forces us to consider that human flourishing maybe isn't just about conquering new lands or achieving military victories or building empires, but it's also about finding that balance, achieving recognition, yes, but also experiencing joy, connection, ensuring the continuation of life itself. It's a reminder that the greatest works of art don't just tell stories about heroes. They illuminate the full, complex spectrum of human experience, the highs and the lows, the public and the private.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you, our listeners, with a final thought to maybe ponder, something to mull over. Consider how much of our own contemporary understanding of glory or progress or national greatness is perhaps built on the very same tensions and contradictions that Camões observed so acutely almost 500 years ago.
Yeah, think about his final critique. Are we sometimes in our own time maybe a bit deaf and hardened to the muses, the critical voices that might be trying to critique our own society, trying to guide us towards a truer sense of virtue or honor beyond just, say, economic success?
Are we perhaps prioritizing that hostile thirst for money, as he put it, over deeper, more enduring values? It's a challenging question to ask ourselves, reading Camões today.
It really is. We definitely encourage you, if you're intrigued, to explore Os Lusíadas for yourselves. Maybe pick up one of these intelligently modernized editions, like the one Pimpone worked on, and experience this rich, complex tapestry directly. See how it speaks to you.
Or perhaps use this as a springboard. Delve into other epic poems, classical or modern, or explore other historical contexts that reveal similar timeless truths about human nature, about societal values, about the tension between celebrating achievement and confronting flaws.
There's just such a rich world of knowledge and insight waiting to be discovered in these great works. And texts like Os Lusíadas continue to speak to us, to challenge us across the centuries if we take the time to listen.
If you enjoy this journey with us today through the tides of glory and the secrets of the text, please don't forget to subscribe to the deep dive on whatever platform you use to listen.
And hey, leave us a review if you feel like it. It helps other people find the show.
Absolutely. And please share this exploration with others who, like you, love diving into rich, multi-layered knowledge and uncovering the stories behind the stories.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into Camões and Os Lusíadas.
It's been fascinating. We promise another deep dive into something equally compelling next time.
Subscribe to the Timeless Tales podcast. Your stories, your time.